Greetings, one and all, in this bizarre dystopian nightmare we call our current shared reality, and welcome to the third installment of the OPCO podcast brought to you by the Possum Paranormal Coalition of the Ozarks of Ohio and beyond. I'm Donnie, and I'm here with founding member of the Possum Paranormal, Seth Daughtrey, and tonight we have a special guest joining us. Our guest tonight is Wren Collier, and you may have heard him on a variety of alternative podcasts, including Where Did the Road Go?, Charm the Water, A Culture, or Strange Familiars, just to name a few. Tonight he joins us in the OPCO Discord server to talk about the paranormal, the occult, and current events. So join us in welcoming Wren to the show. Welcome, man.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, man, it's great to have you here. I don't know if you want to start off and maybe tell everybody just like a little bit about yourself, maybe some of your creds.
Yeah, sure.
We'll go from there.
Okay, so I'm Wren. I am a practicing magician and a thelemite, and I'm currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the Twin Cities. I'm originally from the South, so originally from Alabama. I grew up there and just moved up here pretty recently. And I'm really passionate about the study and development of the occult. Passionate about making it accessible and available to everyone. And I'm also, pretty passionate leftist and socialist, as we talked about privately.
Oh yeah.
I think these days you kind of have to take a stance. It's like even what's considered left right now isn't really even left. It's just to the left of.
To the left
of center. Yeah. Well, cool, man.
There's no real left coalition in the U.S., at least not with any power.
No, none.
Yeah. So how's the quarantines treating you? Are you locked into the house?
Well, it's been all right. Honestly, I work from home anyway.
Oh, cool.
So that part of my life didn't really change pretty much at all. I guess things are. It's more like my life hasn't really changed that much, but I can see other people's lives around me have changed a lot. And there's this like me and my partner live separately, so I usually go over and travel and like visit her, especially like on the weekends and stuff. So I've kept doing that, but I haven't really been going out, to bars or to restaurants or anything. But I didn't do that often to begin with. Kind of 21 anymore, so I don't really go to bars that often.
Yeah. Me either.
Yeah. So honestly, a lot hasn't really changed there, but just dealing with this like sense of general unease and anxiety, I had to make a run to the grocery store last night, and just, everybody staying away from each other. There's this just tangible sense of doom in the air that's like really creepy.
It's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Really weird, especially like here in where I live in Springfield, Missouri, and so it's still kind of busy outside, but also like a lot of the parking lots are just really empty.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really, really bizarre. And I don't know. It's kind of same. I've always worked from home too. I work in the medical industry, and so is my wife. And so we never leave our apartment anyways. Like, so it's really easy for us to just stay isolated, but
yep.
But we I guess tonight I was wanting to bring you on to talk about Thelema a little bit more, because I kind of, on our first episode, I talked a little bit about it, but I also said that it kind of, and see, I'll be honest with you, I have a pretty basic understanding, because I just started getting into deeper occult stuff probably at the beginning of this year. Okay. So I came into it. I said on the last episode, or the first episode, where it kind of had some. I don't really know if is it like Egyptian overtones in it, or is there anything to do with that in there at all?
I mean, there is, like, the three sort of gods of Thelema are Egyptian, yeah, but it's more like Crowley adopted Egyptian imagery for some of it. It's not necessarily like an Egyptian religion.
Gotcha.
It's just that kind of like, Victorian fascination with Egypt and ancient history that I think bled its way into it.
Okay. Because I know, like he went to, what was it, Cairo? Is that right? And he had, I don't know, is it pronounced Iowas or Aowas?
I say Iowas.
Okay, that's kind of where I kind of go with it. And like, talked to him, and he wrote, was it the Book of the Law over like 3 days? Is that right?
Yeah, over 3 days. Basically, what happened was he was honeymooning in Cairo with his wife, Rose, and while they were there, he paid to have someone do a translation of the Stele of Revealing, which was this like funeral stele. And his, like, after they read it, I think like his wife Rose had this sort of channeling session where she was like channeling Horus or something. And then later on that evening, Crowley started channeling the Book of the Law itself. He claimed it was being dictated to him by this entity named Iwas. And the Book of the Law itself, Liber Alveligis, it's split into sort of 3 chapters, 3 parts, and each part is narrated by a different Thelemic entity. So the first part is narrated by Nuit. The second part is who's like sort of the universe, the sky, sort of this female goddess. The second part is narrated by Hadit, who is this sort of like force of action, like you could say male force, but like force of action. And then the third part is narrated by Rahur Kuit, who's sort of a combination god, but is basically supposed to be Horus.
Okay.
Like Horus the child. And yeah, it was actually recently. Right now we're in the depths of the Thelemic holy season. So it was around this time when the 3 days were. So if I'm not mistaken, I had to go look it up. I'm not a very good Thelemite, and that I don't remember all the holy days and stuff. I'm not that devout, but the real thing about Thelema that appealed to me, because I originally got involved with the OTO up here because I was listening to, I think, a podcast. I was listening to Glitch Bottle, I think, and they were interviewing Joseph Peterson, and Joseph Peterson mentioned, I didn't realize that he lived in the Twin Cities, and he started talking about, it's like some local colleges. I think St. Olaf was one of them. And he mentioned that, he got some documents from there in his latest research. And I was like, oh, neat. Joseph Peterson lives here. That's kind of cool. And then he mentioned Sleeping Laughter Lodge. And I was like, wait, what is that? So like I look it up and, oh, it's an OTO lodge here. And at this point in my life, it was like, I guess about a year and a half ago, I didn't really know anything about Thelema. I'd actually originally Book of the Law early 20s, and at some point
I think our audio is cutting out.
Yeah, I think Wren, if you can hear us, your audio is cutting out. Looks like they're still there.
Yeah, I still hear it. I mean, I still see him in here. Uh-oh. Oh. Oh.
All right, I think they're going to restart. Oh.
Yeah.
Hello.
Just rejoining Kenny.
I kind of hear you. It glitched out a little bit.
Weird.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Oh, I don't know if it's my internet. So what part did you catch there? What should I reiterate?
I think it was right whenever you were talking about. It started cutting out right when you were talking about actually. I think finding out about Joseph Peterson talking about the lodge.
Yeah, so I heard Joseph Peterson talk about Leaping Laughter Lodge here in Minneapolis. So I looked it up online, found out that it was a local OTO body, and on their calendar they had every Tuesday night there was a ritual night, and it was kind of proposed as almost like a crafting night or something. Like everyone could come work on their rituals, and at the time, and I still am, I'm like deeply focused on like Renaissance magic, so grimoire magic, angel magic. And so I was like, oh, cool. Maybe I can go up there and talk to people about this. And I sat on the fence for, probably a month or two, and I finally decided just to go. And what I found was a lot of really cool people who were practicing magicians who were really willing to talk to me and help me learn magic. It was super awesome. And that's really when I got exposed to Thelema as a concept. Because before, I'd heard the whole, because for people who aren't familiar with Thelema at all, Thelema is you could say it's a religion, but it's more of a, let's say, spiritual philosophy.
Yeah.
That was founded by British occultist Aleister Crowley. And the basic tenet of Thelema is that there is one law, and that law is do what thou wilt. Like literally, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. And I'd heard that when I was younger. And people who have any sort of Wiccan background might be somewhat familiar with that. And there's a good reason for that I'll talk about a little later. But their version has a little, and it harm none, do what thou wilt, which I think should be left unstated.
Yeah.
But I'll get into that. Because sometimes you gotta do a little hurting. But overall, like I'd heard that before, right? And I thought, oh, that just sounds like giving shitty people carte blanche to do whatever they want, right? And feel like they're getting away with it. I didn't have any really like nuanced understanding what that meant. And it was from talking to specifically Scott Stenwick at Leaping Laughter. I was like, oh, what do what thou wilt really means is that every person, because it requires this understanding of what Crowley means when he says will, right? Like your will is your purpose, like your purpose in life. And the basic idea is that in order to live right, in order to like be happy and to like live your life properly, you need to be trying to accomplish like whatever your true purpose is. Okay. And everyone has that purpose. And all of these kind of maladies spring out of not living your true will. And the idea is that there should be nothing in the way of you trying to pursue your true will. It also means too, like, because there are some Thelemites who are guilty of this, of portraying this as license to steal and kill and do whatever you want.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about too. It's like that part of it as well.
Yeah, because this is the way I think about it. And Crowley, even if you want to read Crowley's thoughts on this, he writes about this in Magic Without Tears, which is a really great series of letters between him and this English lady. But the idea is that if you steal from someone, if you somehow believe it's your true will to, like, I don't know, kill someone, right? All you're doing during that is taking away their ability to follow their true will. Okay, so in sense, you're like breaking the law, basically, because
Right.
you're preventing another human being from carrying out their will. And the idea too, like, one of the other main tenets of Thelema is that every man and every woman is a star, right? There's a gender binary there because it was written in the 1900s, but the idea is that all people are equal, right? Like there's no reason anyone is better or than anyone else, right? It's a completely egalitarian viewpoint.
Right.
And when I started really thinking about this and my own like leftist views, I realized I was like, oh, Thelema is like literally like an anarchist spiritual system.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it's like the idea is that, because how could you possibly follow your true will, right? If you are chained to wage slavery? How can you follow your true will if you live in a society where all people aren't equal, right? Where we have class differences, we have racism and poverty. All of these things interfere with your ability to live your true will. And that's what I started to realize, at least in my own interpretation of Thelema, was that like this is a spiritual system for people who are like unhappy with the current power structures that run the earth. And I was already sort of like in anarcho syndicalist or whatever beforehand, and the way Crowley's views on Thelema meshed with, say, like Godwin's writings on anarchism, like really, really like spoke to me. And if you go back and kind of see what Crowley was trying to create, like you read about the Abbey of Thelema that he tried to establish in Italy, it was always meant to be sort of like a commune or like communist system, right? His whole idea was that like Thelemites would take care of each other. That between Thelemites there wouldn't be like money, there wouldn't be, everything would sort of be, there was like, I guess, like mutual aid or whatever.
Like no class or anything, kind of just how like communism is, where it takes away the class of people.
Exactly. And sort of my problem, but see, here's the thing though, like Thelema and the OTO aren't perfect. I'm not a huge fan of the OTO personally. But also too, I want everyone to know, you don't have to be in the OTO to be a Thelemite. The OTO is its own thing. It's a Thelemic organization, but you don't have to have any, like people like Jake Stratton Kent are Thelemites, but they have nothing to do with the OTO. And in a lot of ways, I don't know. I want to get kicked out, so I don't want to say too much. But
yeah, no, you don't have to go into it super deep. Just like I basically want everybody here that's listening, or like, because we've got people listening right now, but we also have like people that are just they're kind of just dipping into the occult. Like, I want them to have a basic understanding of also other ideologies that they might be able to explore as well, as instead of just like, Satanism or something like that. So
it's funny because like a lot of people will try to paint Crowley as like a Satanist, or Thelema as like a Satanist organization or something. I mean, I've seen that.
Yeah.
But it has like literally nothing to do with like Christian theology. Like
it's just like true Satanism too. There's no like, I mean, would they use him like, they use Satan as like an ideology or like a icon, but they don't believe in that like belief structure. So
I mean, calling Thelema Satanism is about the same as like calling Hinduism Satanism. It's like it's a different religion. Like it has nothing to do with Christian theology. One of the basic ideas too behind Thelema is that when the Book of the Law was transmitted to Crowley in 1904, that ushered in like the birth of a new aeon, right? And like a new chapter in history. And there's this whole idea of like aeonics. Currently, at least this is what I believe, and this is what Crowley believed, that we currently live in the aeon of Horus, or the aeon of the child. And the former aeon was the aeon of Osiris, which is sort of an aeon characterized by death and rebirth narratives. So like your sort of Christ narrative, the Osiris myth, all of these myths involving some sort of like self-sacrifice and then resurrection from the dead, that like hallmarked the Osirian age. But now we live in the aeon of Horus, like the aeon of the child, or the age of Aquarius, if you want to look at it in astrological terms.
Yeah.
But the idea is that we live in a fundamentally different world now. And in order to bring about like the change that's required, I mean, I don't know. I see things like the UFO flaps of the 1940s and things like the Russian Revolution, the crumbling of existing power structures into the 21st and 20th and 21st century. I see these all as outgrowths of the change of the aeons. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's just kind of what I see. And I mean,
well, that makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, because especially like all of the UFO flaps and like everything back in the 40s, that was a big thing for a lot of people there that had never, I mean, no one's ever really experienced that unless you go back to like those like sightings of like flying machines from like the 1800s. But like that was a really big cultural shift at the time. Everybody was like into super like science fiction. There was all these like movies about UFOs coming around that time, and it was crazy. Somebody just asked in the thing, do you think what is happening now is a big thing, like as in this pandemic. Do you think that's also like some sort of cultural shift as well?
I've been thinking about that a lot recently. I was even talking in my own Discord server about how, like, I don't know how many of your viewers have watched Hellier.
Oh yeah, I preach that like I'm trying to get everybody to watch it. I've watched it like 4 times, and like I think my wife is probably sick of me saying to tell everybody to watch it, but she's also watched it too. And yeah, continue on what you're gonna say, man.
So, in a lot of ways, so maybe I should back up just a second and talk a little bit about like the secret chiefs or whatever. For people who don't have sort of a different worldview, this can be a little hard to wrap your head around. But I believe we live in a world that's full of spirits, different kinds, and spirits that have agency, that have their own agendas, that have the ability to make decisions and form partnerships. And the idea of the secret chiefs is that there are this group, and you could say that they're ascended masters, that they're like ascended human beings. That's like one mythological basis for it. But I just kind of see them as spirits with a specific agenda. They're sort of what in Hellier is referred to as like the fourth or the third order. Right?
Yeah,
it's the ascended masters, secret chiefs, the ones who found these secret societies like the Golden Dawn and like and like I believe that at certain points in history they try to establish a current, like a current of ideas and energy and change. And in the case of Thelema, that's the 93 current. And the current itself like chooses groups of people that to try to establish it, right? To bring it out and to overtake the current, like or the modern current. So earlier, the problem is the 93 current has failed at every opportunity over the last 100 years or over 100 years now. Crowley's organization collapsed, I think in the 50s or something. Like the OTO basically fell apart. Like Nazi Germany got rid of the OTO in Europe.
Yeah.
But it was still continuing in the US, which is where you had like the Agape Lodge and Jack Parsons and stuff. But ultimately it fell apart. It was later like recreated by Grady McMurtry. But the current OTO is, I don't think, an organization that is doing the bidding of the current. Like it's not like trying to bring in the Aeon of Horus. Okay. And people like Jack Parsons like blew himself up. Every opportunity for there to be like a movement forward with this current has been broken up. What I feel like the Hellier thing is, and when I talked to Alan Greenfield, he kind of like agreed with me on this. I think it is the 93 current trying to reestablish itself in our modern world. Right? And it chose the Newkirks because they were like, they had enough of a following and enough of like the ability to produce the media that would reach people. But they were also weird enough to roll with it and not immediately be like, it's all demons or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think it is the current trying to reestablish itself. I think that Hellier is just a tiny part of it. But I think that there are a lot of big moves happening. And I think that this latest coronavirus thing is going to fundamentally change the world. Like, I don't think, and I'm sorry to say this to people, I don't think we're ever going back to the way it was before.
No,
I was thinking it's kind of like another 9/11 event.
It is. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it is going to be a complete change in something. For better or worse, I don't know. I will say that at risk of sounding, a little too revolutionary, this kind of is the perfect moment for there to be like an actual revolution.
Oh, it is definitely.
You know, with current existing structures collapsing. You know, so I don't know. In 2-3 years, we may be living in a very different world.
I think that a lot of folks' support of more left-leaning ideas, most recently, they've got the numbers. They, the giant capital letter they with the air quotes, they have all the numbers for people who actually support, the idea of supplying the people with health care and people with these social programs that maybe could increase our quality of life. And I think that it was pretty much now or never with this kind of thing right now, because everybody's in their house now. They're not out there protesting. They're not making the revolution a revolution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just talking to somebody about this earlier. What I think a lot of people are waking up to this in this election. Okay, because I started this primary season very starry-eyed, phone banking for Bernard, going out and canvassing, really believing that electoralism was still a thing.
Yeah.
I've gone like full doomer mode at this point, and I'm like, oh, it's all rigged. Like, it's literally just all bullshit. And I'm wondering how many other people are going to wake up to that. Like, I was talking to my partner today about how I feel like the electoralism in this country, like the voting system, like the whole system that we think has like control over this country. It's a lot like you ever go to the grocery store and some of the carts have like a little steering wheel for your kid, like that you set when you set them in the little thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like our ability to like go out and vote and stuff is kind of like that little steering wheel.
It's like, you're you big doofus. Yeah, you're control, you big doofus. You can go ahead and do this. Sure.
You're controlling the cart. Here you go. You're making us go in all these directions. And it's kind of meant to just give us this illusion that we have some say in the matter.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's all planned, and it's all sort of maybe not planned down to the T. I'm sure there's still divisions and still rivalries and stuff, but I think it's mainly just a system to off valve people's frustration, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how many other people are going to wake up to that, because here's the problem though, and I've been reading up on this. Even if we wanted to have a revolution, like I just don't think it would work. Like the reason the Bolsheviks were able to win in the October Revolution was because they had support of like a large swath of the military and parts of the Navy, and they had this sort of existing power base they were able to pull together at the right moment. And we all know that the left doesn't have anything like that in America.
No.
Especially not in the military.
Yeah.
Especially not in things like police forces. And I was like, even if there was an actual uprising, it would get completely creamed. Like, I just don't see it actually working.
Especially not right now, because everything's controlled by just a bunch of like neoliberals in charge, and it's all just an established I guess power of this, and people are like, well, there's these two sides to it. It's like, no, there's really not. It's like you're seeing these two things. There's a Democrat and like Republicans, but they're the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's because they don't have a class. They don't have like a theory of class. Like, they don't understand class. It's like you have the rich and the not rich. You have the people who control the means of production and the people who work. Like there's a distinct difference, and it doesn't have anything to do with politics.
It's like that movie Metropolis.
Yeah. Yeah, Metropolis is a really good.
That,
yeah, it's good. I think I recommended that to somebody like while they're inside their house recently too. So,
I mean, the big problem is that I guess I'd always kind of known that a lot of Americans were just kind of brainwashed, but I think, underestimated the bovine quality of most of America.
Well, Wren, on your website, Liminal Room, you talked about the possibility of a man-in-the-middle cyber attack on the basic human senses, theoretically allowing for input going from your eyes to your visual receptors to be hacked and manipulated. And you have a quote on there talking about how Sony has been renewing an annual patent for a machine that uses ultrasonics to plant sensory experiences directly into the brain.
Yes.
Do you worry about 5G technology being able to or actually doing things like this?
I don't know about the 5G thing. I haven't really read up on it enough, and I think it's because the people I usually hear talking about it are, I don't know. I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but let's just say like some of the cornier parts of conspiracy world. So
sure.
I tend to just think it's like a thing that like is not actually a thing, because it feels like one of those, how do I put this? It feels like one of those blinds, right? It's like something that I tend to like look at whatever people are yelling about the loudest and think that, yeah, there's probably some truth to that, but what is being hidden by all this yelling? Like what's going on in the other hand, you know? And I get the feeling too, like, I hate to say this, but I feel like so much of conspiracy culture in this country, a lot of the, you know, like this wraps into people talking about 5G, people talking about disclosure and everything. I can't help but feel like a lot of it is manipulated.
Oh yeah, for
you know,
sure,
like
absolutely. Disinformation everywhere.
agents and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. I know this is. I mean, we know this is true in the UFO world.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
There's always like that. And like,
But,
wasn't Hynek supposed to be like a disinformation agent by some people, or?
I mean, possibly. Possibly. Like Hynek. I mean, Hynek was he was a military guy, and so it makes it hard to trust him. But I don't know. Like Hynek.
I think he's pretty genuine.
Yeah, I think he was. I'm not so much worried about people like Hynek, but I think a lot of times too, and you know, people know this. This isn't like anything new, but a lot of times there is some truth to what's going on, but the idea is to make it so outrageous that it is like unable to be believed by
like David Icke,
normal people. Yeah, yeah. Because I think about like, if you look at a lot of the stuff that David Icke says, and just take out the lizard people thing, all of a sudden it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, me and Sarah talk about that constantly. It's just like you watch his videos, and if you just change the language a little bit, like the structures are there for actual like kind of elevation of mind, but then he puts in like terms that are kind of, you know, kooky. And I think that's how he stays out of trouble in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and I think you saw this really strongly in the whole Pizzagate phenomena, right?
Oh yeah.
Because like, I mean, we all know now, and I was super guilty of this back during the Pizzagate stuff of being like, oh, this is all BS, this is all nonsense. And yeah, for a large part, it probably was, because if you look at the people who were like most involved with it, like Cernovich, he's like a lackey of Dershowitz, so of course, like he has some sort of role to play in this. But it wasn't until after the Epstein stuff came out that I realized, I was like, oh, well, some of this is true, like for sure. But it almost felt like the Pizzagate thing was a purposefully outrageous story that was put out there and loudly promoted by a lot of the conspiracy culture as a way to hide what was really going on and to add like an air of disrepute to it, so that normal people wouldn't look too much into it. They're like, oh, that's just crazy nonsense.
Yeah,
you know,
I could see that. I could definitely see that, because that's like a, I mean, that's a very big tactic of like, even our government is just like calling everything fake or everything like crazy or weird or giving things wacky names.
Even the term
so they.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. So it just discredits them. So you just don't believe them.
Yeah, and you look at some of the people involved, like Posobiec, who is like, I think he was Army intelligence or Naval intelligence. I think he's Naval intelligence. And anytime I see anyone involved in naval intelligence, I go like full Bill Cooper mode. I'm just like, they are disinformation agents. Like every naval intelligence guy is like that's the reason I was going insane like a couple months ago about Pete Buttigieg, because he's like ex-naval intelligence.
Oh yeah. Wow.
I'm like, this dude is a CIA agent. Like, how could you people not see this? And I mean, you look at the history. I mean, just what's going on in the media now. You look at the history of the CIA's program, especially like Operation Mockingbird, and this whole idea that actually, like, it may not even be like a direct control kind of thing, but I feel like so much of the news media in this country is directly controlled by intelligence agencies. And that's what a lot of people don't realize about the CIA. Like, they think that, of course, they want people to think this. They give them this image of like, oh, they're protecting America. They're patriotic,
Yeah.
When in reality, the CIA was founded by like Wall Street bankers and lawyers.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, all they've cared about is protecting capitalism at all costs. Mm-hmm. And that's all that they have done.
And they've done it really effectively too. I mean, like, look at all the famous people that have just, died.
Yeah. I was thinking.
I could list them, but
people
Jesus.
Laugh.
I just heard the thing today about Ghislaine Maxwell apparently saying that she wants the Epstein estate to like pay for her legal fees or something. But of course, there's like no photo of her, and like nobody actually knows where she is. She's like still in hiding. So I'm like, I don't know if this is her, because I honestly think that she's probably poured into the foundations of some building in Saudi Arabia. Like, I just don't see her actually still being alive. But
yeah,
maybe.
that's dark, man. But I mean, that's not inaccurate. I mean, that's a pretty legitimate fear, because me personally, with like getting into like conspiracy, it all started like I started getting into like deeper thought probably like a beginning of this year. I've always been into like things like that, but I was always like, this stuff's ridiculous. Why would I look into it? And it's because I didn't want to like critically think, and I used to be a really terrible centrist. Like really awful. I used to argue with my own wife over things I believed in just because I wanted to argue half the time. So like it wasn't until like I just stopped caring about like my own past indoctrination into like Christianity and like a bunch of other things, where I was just like, fuck this, I'm gonna start just actually caring about all these interests I've had since I was a kid, and just start being like extremely weird and thinking about all of these like conspiracies about like the government. And like then I'd dive into it and I realized the government just fucking hates us. And then it made me into like a super left like weirdo, where I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna just go ahead and like tie a bandana around my face constantly and like riot somewhere. I'm not really gonna do that, but like disclaimer, but
parody.
Yeah, parody.
It almost makes you want to, though. I mean, it's like, it's so polarizing. You know what I mean? And seriously, though, it is very polar. Like, the world that we live in is created to incite a level of chaos, so we don't have our footing. We're caught flat-footed.
It's all about alienation. That's what Mark said. It's all about creating distance between people and communities.
Yeah, and look what we're doing now, social distancing.
Exactly. This is like the final stage, because it started out, destroying the labor unions and destroying people's sense of like solidarity with each other. Like
you can't even tell people like your employers like don't tell your fellow workers how much you make.
It's like,
because
why not?
that's gonna make them mad at us. And it's like or that's gonna make them mad at you that you make more. It's like, no, it should make them mad at the job for like not paying them like equally or whatever for stuff. It's like it turns workers against each other instead of workers against the actual people that are the problem.
Yeah, imagine how different things would be if a lot of like workers knew how much more their managers made than them.
I don't think people can fathom that, and that's the thing. Like when you tell people, like you could say to them, well, like let's say for instance Jeff Bezos, he makes like 100 and like he's like worth like 110 billion, right? People can't fathom that much money because we make so little.
That's as much as an entire metropolitan area.
That's so much money. I can't even think about that much. Like what would that look like? Would it look like a giant fuck all mountain of money in front of me? I don't know. It probably. I have no idea.
And like people don't understand that like he's only able to make that amount of money because a lot of people, you'll see people like try to defend him and be like, oh well, it's his money and he earned it. He can do whatever he wants to with it. I'm like, he didn't earn that money. That money was obtained by exploiting the labor of hundreds of thousands of other people.
Yeah.
Like if we lived in a just system, then Amazon would be a collectively owned company and everybody who worked for Amazon would make a ton of money, right? Because they'd all get equal pay. And again, too, like you mentioned, it's like a mountain of money. Like or here's a good example. Somebody who's not even as rich as Bezos, like Mike Bloomberg. So Mike Bloomberg spent more money than anyone in history on his failed presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. But even the amount of money that he spent wasn't even 1% of his wealth.
Yeah.
The amount of money that he spent was the interest that he gets on his wealth. You know, like it literally cost him nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't get. Like, and we're so conditioned to just like lick boots these days. And it's like, I did a whole show about socialism on Conspiranormal, and one of the guys on the show was like, well, you know, I just consider myself a capitalist or whatever. And I was like, well, where do you work? And he works at a fry stand in the mall. I'm like, well, do you own capital? Like, you know, you say you're a capitalist. Is that your shop? Do you own the fryers? You know, and of course not. He's just an employee. So I'm like, all that labor that you put forth, all that money, all it does is just flow upwards. You get almost nothing of the amount of the value that you generate.
Yeah, you get so little.
Yeah, like Means TV did a good like man on the street thing about this, about kind of letting people know like the actual value of their labor. Like, you know, you do this or you provide this service. Here's how much money it actually generates. Here's how much you're getting of that.
Yeah.
And I've seen some different graphics of that. And when people actually look at that, they understand pretty quickly, oh, I'm being screwed.
Yeah. And I mean, you are. It's like, I like to tell people a lot, capitalism is like one of the only places where you can work 24 hours a day, or like, let's say like whoever's in charge of like the company, they could be going on golf trips or vacations or like sitting in their house, and they're constantly getting a stream of money in. But that's because we don't stop working as workers. And it's the same thing with like, I mean, right now we're seeing it with like landlords. We're paying the landlord's wages with our rent. Like they own a house, but like they don't have a job, and a lot of landlords are freaking out because they're not going to get paid anymore because we're not getting paid. It's a weird system.
Yeah, and people don't get this. Like, I was just fantasizing yesterday about like what would happen if like a general strike was declared in this country. Like all like, because I was looking to think about how Trader Joe's employees like weren't being allowed to wear face masks or like gloves or whatever, and I was like, man, what if they all just had a strike?
It just didn't do anything.
What would it do to that? Because that's what people don't realize their own power. I'm like, your boss doesn't make any money unless you work.
Yeah.
You know? And if you don't work, he doesn't make any money either. And I was just thinking, like, of all the jobs that are like currently, I mean, there's basically already the equivalent of a general strike going on.
Yeah.
You know, like people like me, I'm still working because I work from home anyway. But like a lot of people are certainly not like working right now.
Yeah.
The main people who are out there still working are, you know, transportation, you know, hospitality, food service, grocery store employees, things like retail employees. Like, what would happen if they literally all just had a strike? Like, this country's economy would just like crumble.
It would tank like almost instantly. Well, not instantly, but it would definitely take a big dive.
Yeah.
And in the comments section, Soapwitch said, "Look at all the people considered essential employees who don't even make a living wage."
Yeah, exactly. And that's the crazy thing, is that like
why aren't these people getting hazard pay?
Yeah, they should be getting hazard pay. I mean, you know, a lot of people know this, but it's kind of insane that we live in a country where you could have 2 or 3 jobs, work 60 hours a week, and still not make enough money to maybe just barely cover your rent.
Yeah.
You know, and the income inequality in this country has grown so outrageously over the last 30 years. It's like, I just wonder how far it can go. Because right now, income inequality in the US is higher than it was in pre-revolutionary France.
Yeah.
Okay. It is at insane levels. And I see these videos of like Gal Gadot singing Imagine, or like Arnold Schwarzenegger like telling people to like, you know, to stay in their homes while he's like sitting in his jacuzzi, like smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at all this. I'm like, are these people this? Do they believe in their own immortality this strongly?
Yeah. They don't know what they've lost connection of what it's like to be an average person. Like
Mm-hmm.
I saw something on like Twitter where like the CNN was like talking about like people going right out of college and making an $80,000 a year job. I was like, that doesn't fucking happen.
Yeah,
No one fucking makes that money right out of college unless like you're just super lucky.
Yeah.
Like, that's just ridiculous. And they're like, if you can't get by on $80,000 a year, you should just like, I don't know, fucking die or something. And it's like no one makes that much money.
Yeah,
it's wild.
And the disparity between that is what I don't understand it. You know, like I think you saw like the joke I made on Twitter where I was like about the Gal Gadot video being like, or at CIA GoFundMe I think made the joke, but they were like Marie Antoinette sings John Lennon's Imagine with other French aristocrats.
Yeah. That's really
and
good.
I'm just wondering, like, I mean, I don't know. I look at these like photo, like Kylie Jenner, I think today was like posted a photo where she's like, what should I watch on Netflix or whatever? And she's like in this like gold plated living room with like a huge bottle, like wine rack behind her with all these bottles. And I'm just like, are these people this like tone deaf? Like,
yeah,
because I just can't imagine this going on much longer without people storming these mansions, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I saw a show a while back, and it was a few years ago, but it was showing how these mansions are basically like fortresses. There are like defense companies who come in and they like have barricading doors that come down that lock, and there's like gun turrets built into the hallways and like gas chamber hallways. And these are in L.A. These are in Virginia. These are like high ranking like government officials. These are people in the movie industry, and I mean, it was a TV show. You know what I mean? It's not just some conspiracy theory. It was pretty fucking crazy. So I imagine that Kylie Jenner is probably sitting in one of those fortresses, so she doesn't really mind that much.
Yeah, I mean, there was that article, I think a Business Insider or something. It was pretty recent about this guy who was consulting with these billionaires and about sort of like doomsday scenarios, because a lot of billionaires are like doomsday prepper guys. And one of them wanted to know like what the best way to control his personal security forces would be, in a shit hit the fan situation. And there were some different ideas like, well, you could make them wear like shock collars, or you could hold their families like hostage and say if they didn't cooperate that you'd kill their wife and child, or that you could control, like if you were a billionaire and you had these private security forces, like you could basically have like food dispensers that dispense food to these people like animals, and only you like have the key for it, and it doesn't like dispense the food unless you authorize it each day or something, so they like have to keep you alive. And it's like, this is how these people think.
This is like from the Road Warrior or whatever that movie is, that Mad Max movie, wherever it Road to whatever.
Oh, Fury Road.
Fury Road with the guy with the water and the Bane mask.
Yeah.
Immortan Joe. Is that who it was? I think that's his name.
These people are really contemplating being that guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't know how many people have watched the recent like Netflix show, like Altered Carbon. Well, it had its second season recently. It came out a couple of years ago. But that vision of a future in which, like, that is one of the scariest shows I've ever watched. And I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but the basic idea behind it is that you can sort of back up your mind to like a hard drive and sort of resurrect yourself if you ever die. And all of the super rich people, they're all like hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they all kind of live in these cities in the sky, and they're like unkillable, because even if you were to assassinate them, they would just reboot themselves somewhere else in a different body. And that, I feel like some people look at that and they're like, yes, that's what I want to be. That, like that's why I get so creeped out by people like Bezos and Elon Musk who talk about like space colonies and stuff, because I'm like,
they'll leave us all here.
Exactly. Like I've said it before, like you can't ascend to the throne of heaven without building the throne in heaven.
Yeah.
Like what is if you want to control the population of Earth and never ever have to worry about revolt or storming your mansion, what better place than on Mars or on the moon or whatever, you know?
Yeah, it's like Elysium or something.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous to think about that. And like I don't know, that also makes me think of like all these times. It's kind of similar where people like they want like that future where they can be like this, they can like go from body to body, but it's like you're never going to be that. Like you're not going to get that power.
No. Yep.
And it's like people like today where they defend billionaires. It's like, well, they worked hard for that money. It's like, no, they didn't, and you're never going to be one of those people. Like because you were not born into that.
Yeah.
Like you can work hard and make a okay wage, but you're never going to like be able to work hard and get to that level of richness. So why do you care?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even think like they think that people like Bezos just built this thing from the ground up or whatever.
No.
And what they don't realize is that like he had like a huge amount of seed money from his like rich parents and stuff. Like, yeah, maybe there are a few success stories out there, but you're not going to be one of those success stories.
Yeah.
You know?
Like my uncle was pretty successful, but and his actually was hard work. Like he was like he was born poor, and like he worked, but it was also like he started doing it back in like the 70s and like 50s, or not 50s but 70s and like 80s. So like it was a little bit easier back then to like kind of get into there and actually buy a whole entire like shipping business or something.
Yeah. Well, even that, like a lot of those people don't like we mentioned before, people don't understand like how rich the 1% actually are.
Yeah.
Like people look at, you know, a small to medium business owner who, you know, maybe has like $1 million, $2 million in the bank. People like Bernie Sanders, you know, like everybody makes a big deal out of Bernie Sanders having $1 million. I'm like, you don't understand. That's not that much money.
That's pretty low in comparison.
Yeah, that's like literally not that much money. You're just, everyone in this country is so poor that it seems like an astronomical amount of money to them, but it's like you have no idea how much richer some part of population is. Like, you know, like my partner's granddad, he opened like one of the first Midas mufflers in Georgia or something, and you know he made, I think he was like a millionaire, and like, you know, like he left all of his grandchildren like a nice, like, you know, trust fund and stuff like that. But like that is wealthy, but not in the way we're talking about people like Bezos.
Yeah, that's just, it's like they could spend $1 billion, and it's like they my favorite thing is like when they donate to charities.
Oh yeah,
and it's like it is good they do that. Let me phrase that. It's good that they're donating money to those charities because those charities need it. But they could definitely donate way more than they do.
But the amount they donate is like basically the interest on their principal wealth. It's like
I think
nothing.
He donated like 90 something million, like a while back. I can't remember what charity it was, but like people were like, "Oh, he's such a good guy." I was like, "You have no idea in comparison to how much more money he has." Like that's like me donating like $5 to somebody, or like 20, or maybe 100 to somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Soapwitch is in the comments section and said Bloomberg spent more on his press campaign, or his presidential campaign, than Michael Jackson was worth when he died.
Oh, that's sad. That's really sad.
Like that is astronomical.
Yeah.
I was talking to the other day online with some people because I had posted a thing that was talking about how the stock market's kind of a sham for the ultra rich because it's really just a tool for them to kind of fleece people for money while also tying in the average person's futures into their success. So like 401ks, you know, the stock market has to be healthy for those things to actually mature. And so, you know, people have this tendency to like really defend the stock market, which is like only really good for the ultra elite people who actually have millions and millions of dollars to dump into these stocks that, you know, they know beforehand typically what's going to happen. It's a total disconnect.
Yeah. I mean, insider trading is absolutely rampant. You know, occasionally people get caught for it, but for the most part, they don't.
I mean, there's a lot of people getting caught. Look at all these CEOs who, right before this whole COVID thing happened, they are all starting to like step away, cash out their stocks.
Yep.
And now they're in their bunkers.
Yeah, and for some reason, it's not a huge deal.
And the thing is, not a lot of people understand like the concept of short selling.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't understand. They make money on the way down too. Yeah. You know, they make money both ways. They make money when the market goes up. They make money when the stock market goes down. It's just a big money printing machine. for the rich, because unless you have like a ton of startup capital, you're like, the stock market's never going to be a good deal for you.
Yeah, there's always too much risk. It's always too much of a gamble unless you can diversify to the point where you're always winning.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just wild. You know, and I'd like to reach out to any listener out there too. If any of you know anybody that has a portable truck with a welder on it, I am a welder, and I will gladly start welding the bunker doors shut on all these rich people that are locked in.
Yes.
I'm really good at MIG welding, arc welding, and TIG welding. Just give me a holler. I'll offer my services. Oh man, I don't know. I get so fired up whenever I talk about stuff like this, and sometimes I have to. I like to. I don't know. I often there's been a couple times where I'll sit there and I like to call myself drunkenly a true patriot half the time because I want freedom for like everyone, not just the rich minority.
Yeah, I mean that's what, like, going back to our original topic, that's what Thelema wants. Like that's what Thelema is. It's like a philosophy of freedom. Like, how are you guys familiar with Liber Oz?
I've heard it like whenever I looked up stuff, but no, I'm not gonna be honest with you, I haven't.
So Liber Oz is basically, it's like the Thelemic Bill of Rights. It's like one page, and I'll just real quickly read over it.
Okay.
And this basically like sums up what Thelema is to me. Like, do what thou wilt, should the whole the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will, do that, and no other shall say nay. And every man and every woman is a star. And the main thing is like, there is no God but man. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will upon the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, speak what he will, write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, and build as he will, and to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. And like, to me, like I talked first about the do what thou wilt and it harm none thing that Wiccans have, sort of the threefold law thing. That actually comes from Thelema. It comes from Crowley. Not a lot of people realize that the whole Wiccan religion is basically Thelema with like a mix of like some Freemasonry.
Yeah.
With this sort of pastiche of like a nature religion slapped on top of it. Most of the sort of Wiccan stuff comes from Crowley. He, as like through the filter of Gerald Gardner. If we're talking about Gardnerian Wicca.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that last point, like that's what I think is like so. That's what gets me really fired up about it, because it's like, you have the right to do all of these things, and you also have the right to defend these rights if someone would try to take them away from you. Like, I think that's like a really powerful statement.
It is. Yeah.
We all have the right to kind of like live as we wouldn't want to live.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the whole point of this giant experiment of America, or at least that's what we were fed, is that everybody has these inalienable rights where, we can be who we want to be. We have the right to pursue happiness in whatever form that is. We don't have to be tied around with the trappings of religion of one person or another, and we get to actually, find that for ourselves.
I mean, that's I guess the idea, or at least that's what the founding fathers told themselves. But
it didn't get carried out very well. Did it?
Well, even
that's crazy.
It didn't even get carried out when they instituted it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, people don't realize that like only land-owning white men could vote for like a long time. Literally, like, if you weren't like a landowner, you weren't allowed to. Even though there's a lot of really lofty language in the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence and everything, when you actually look at the fact that they owned slaves, that they restricted voting to like basically the wealthiest people in the country, it becomes obvious too that they didn't even really believe what they were writing. because if they did, at least most of them would have been a whole lot different.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate because I think the idea is there.
Yeah, the idea is there. It's just they had a lot of like dehumanization of other groups due to like previous religions and things that they were participating in.
Yeah. Well, the tendency towards, I don't know, this country has always had this tendency towards racism and genocide that, it is obvious to anybody who's familiar with the history of like our treatment of the indigenous peoples of this country. Even up to the fact that like eugenics and stuff were like super popular. That's not a lot of people realize about, like, we start looking into the conspiracy culture stuff about like Operation Paperclip.
We started that.
Yeah.
Like we were the ones that started eugenics. Like the Nazis kind of got that idea from us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
and you start looking at how many people in America loved the Nazis.
Yeah, they did. There was like, that was like Bayer. I mean, I've heard this places didn't Bayer like actually like pay the Nazis to like be able to use like concentration camp, like the people to like actually like experiment drugs on, right?
Probably. I don't know about that one. I know about the IBM, where like IBM was supplying them with counting solutions.
Yeah.
And even it goes like in the history of like the most powerful people in this country too. Like I think it was Vannevar Bush, like George Bush's like grandfather, or maybe it was the first.
That's a
Bush's.
wild name.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really wild name.
Vannevar Bush or whatever. But he got in trouble because he was like basically doing like banking for Nazis, like during World War II, like while we were at war with them.
Yeah.
He was like still doing banking stuff for them. And I think like I think FDR told him to knock it off or something. I have to go look up the history on that. But like Henry Ford used to distribute like the International Jew, or like whatever that anti-Jewish tract was, to his own employees. Like they loved him. They loved Hitler. And it was like, that's why I think like so many Nazi scientists, when they came over, they came over to America, they brought them over because, hey, like, it's nothing personal, guys. We're all on the same page here.
Yeah.
Why don't you come over here and work for us now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like we're kind of like this, but we're just sugar free.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, yeah.
Come on over here and start NASA and everything else.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people don't even realize like are you guys familiar with the Galen organization within the CIA?
No.
No.
Okay, so a lot of people realize this, but there was an entire CIA division called the Galen organization, that was run by this like Nazi spy master Galen, and he said, "Yeah, I'll come work for the CIA," because he was like he was Nazi Germany spy master, kind of in their anti-Soviet operations, right? So he was like, "Yeah, I'll come work for the CIA, but only if I can bring all my own guys, and there is no oversight over my activities, and I have complete control."
Oof.
And they were like, "Sure,
Yeah,
cool,
absolutely.
okay.
Come on.
Yeah, come on, man. We're cool."
Oh man, that's I knew about Operation Paperclip a little bit, but like we're gonna be diving. I think eventually, I talked to Donnie about this. We're gonna do an episode over like the occult and also Nazi Germany, because I think in my opinion, I've tried looking up like the Thule Society and things like that, because there's still people that like, I don't know if the Thule Society is still active. I'm pretty sure in some form it's got to be, because I still see people using their symbology online.
Yeah. Well, there's like, I think the people who are doing it online are probably just
edgelords.
Yeah, they're just cosplaying basically. But you guys should read, if you haven't read it, read Peter Levenda's Unholy Alliance.
Oh yeah, that's on my list. It's actually on my Amazon wish list right now.
Yeah, that's totally what you're looking for if you want to do a show about that. Because when Levenda, there's the whole thing at the end of the war. The Nazis went to like South America, Argentina, and stuff. But Levenda actually went down there, and he found one of these like German villages, like in the mountains there, and kind of got captured and interrogated, and was like kicked out of the country and never allowed to come back. So these people are still out there.
Oh yeah.
And
some of them are here.
Well, yeah, Philip K. Dick said this. He said that Germany lost World War II and the Nazis won.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Nazi Germany may have fallen apart, but all of the most powerful people in the Nazi Party went on to prestigious positions inside of the United States and Russia and a bunch of other countries. Like, they all kind of just like got tickets out. I mean, even the history of our own rocketry program. A lot of people like to remember Werner von Braun as being this, father of rocketry and all this kind of stuff. But man, he was a dyed in the wool, diehard Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
There's
this is a whole different topic, but
a lot of them escaped to Argentina. Earlier, we kind of touched on we mentioned the movie Metropolis.
Yeah.
And the original version of Metropolis was originally a lot longer than the one that had gotten popular because there was a lot of missing footage that the German government actually had removed from the film before they released it. And there's been a recent discovery in the past few years or so where they've found that missing footage and then they placed it back in the film. But the missing footage from this German film that the German government had seized was found in Argentina.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I didn't even know about that. And I used to fall asleep watching Metropolis when I was like 18. Because I was like into industrial music and wore goggles on my head. So
it's awesome.
There's still a ton of like, stuff that went missing at the end of the war. Things like Nazi gold, artifacts they looted from Jewish people, museums, all this kind of stuff. A lot of it's still missing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know whatever happened. I need to follow up and see what happened. There was these group of guys, I think in Poland or something, but they were claiming that they had found the location of this like train that was carrying a ton of like Nazi gold that was basically like sealed inside of a mountain, and they had found like the location of it. But I don't know if anything ever came of that because they hadn't like excavated it yet. But there was like a submarine, I think, that was like filled with gold that was kind of never seen again.
Wow.
I don't know. It makes me ties back into my occult interest because like a big aspect of like Remore magic is like treasure magic, like calling up spirits to help you find treasure. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
She called up some spirits to help me find some of this Nazi gold.
Yeah. I think the submarine thing is in I play a lot of video games. I'm pretty sure it's in the first Uncharted. You actually it's like the very first thing you do is you find a submarine that's in the middle of a jungle somewhere, and like you go into it, but it's in the middle of a jungle in like a river, and it's like somehow just stuck there. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's in that. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a pretty well known story, and I just wonder like, and there's the whole black budget thing. To go back to conspiracy culture, where it's like, we know about all the money like Jeff Bezos has, but like, what about the sort of trillions of dollars that just vanish into nothing? Like, what is it all being used for? Some people believe it's like a secret space program. Like, I don't know where I fall on that spectrum. But I will say, if you wanted to build exotic technology, you're going to need a lot of money. So maybe that's where that money goes.
Some people think that a lot of the money goes to underground bases, like there's like secret highways and trains underneath the ground. Especially,
it's possible.
Especially where Seth, where you are in the Ozarks, there's like, I don't know. I think Jesse Ventura did an episode on Pensmore Mansion. Have you heard about that?
No.
Pensmore Mansion is like, it's bigger than the White House. It's supposed to be a single person residence, but it's as big as like, it's literally like a castle. It's out near Branson.
Yeah. No, I've seen it from the highway. It's like you have to go there by like, you have to like get there by like a helicopter, don't you?
Yeah.
My cousin, it's something crazy.
I have a cousin who was one of the first people who were allowed to go to the property to take photos. She was a photographer, and she says that there were places in the house she was not allowed to go, and that there were in the back of the house. There's actually some docks, like like warehouse docks that an entire tractor trailer could drive into. And that supposedly there are like 7 levels under the ground built into the cave system.
Oh, I could believe that.
Yeah. So I don't know, something crazy. But the guy who built that house also created like some of the GPS satellites. for like the Star Wars program.
Yeah, I need to look that up.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, I almost wonder, like, the idea of like having this little secret space room is really evocative, but part of me almost wonders too, is that money, just like you said, just isn't being hoarded, you know,
It
like
probably
removed from, you know, like being fed back into the population. Because I get this sense, like we know Exxon knew that the sea levels were going to rise by so many feet, you know, within so many years, because they raised this, like they raised the stilts in their oil platforms to compensate for it. So part of me almost wonders if the ultra rich aren't basically just like hoarding all the resources they could possibly do, like just extracting every last drop of the milkshake, so that, because they know that like Earth as it exists currently is doomed.
Yeah.
Right. It's going, like there's nothing they can do about it, because their only options are redistribute their wealth and like kind of save the planet that way. But then they would also lose their power.
Yeah.
And basic psychology says that like people will always try to hang on to their power, even if like on a sinking ship, you know, like they'll always try to maintain control. I think this thing we've seen with the Democrats, where they don't care about losing the general election as long as they can keep their Senate seats. Like that's all they really care about, you know, is their own position. And so I wonder if the idea isn't to just suck up all the resources you can and then basically wait for shit to hit the fan and wait it out, like ride out the storm, and let all of the normal people like us tear each other apart. And then they can reemerge from their bunkers and have a fresh, clean, new Earth that they can then control ultimately without any resistance, like forever and ever.
That's the goal, or at least that's what. I mean, look, okay, so I don't believe in biblical prophecy. I believe in there's some patterns to history that some people used to know and other people weren't allowed to know, and some of that may have been encoded in the Bible. Because if you look at, and this is going to sound so fucking crazy, in
don't worry, I'm down for it.
So in the book of Revelation, it talks about a lot of different talk about heaven and then social upheaval that would be needed to happen first before this new Jerusalem could appear. And the thing is that the actual text itself talks about New Jerusalem coming down to earth out of the sky, and it having, you know, a very few people get to actually go into it. But it's got, I mean, look at the descriptions of it. It's got like, you know, everything's made out of like gemstones and gold and pearls and stuff. And it's, you know, only a few people after this, you know, end of the world scenario are allowed to live in that kind of luxury.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't really talk much about the other people.
Yeah.
I guess.
And don't discount the fact that, I mean, you could be onto something there, because I don't discount it at all that a huge swath of the sort of elite in this country, maybe not the super elite, but a lot of like people in politics are like sort of Christian eschatologists or apocalypticists. I know we know like Lindsey Graham, for example, is like totally on board with this, and you know, thinks that we need to. I mean, you saw a lot of this when Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Because they were like, oh, well, you know, this is setting the stage for sort of the final battle. And so you see a lot of these people like Lindsey Graham making trips over to Israel. And I mean, I don't know, like, even if it's not something that's like real in the sense that it's actually going to happen, I think there's a large swath of people who want it to happen enough that they're going to try to make it happen.
I mean, it's a cultural phenomena just like anything else, you know, like an egregore. You know, if enough people believe it, they just accept when those things happen. And they eschew everything else. So, you know, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Yeah. You know, I see like, well, I don't know. Lost my train of thought there.
It happens to me like constantly, but my brain continuously goes over 1,000 ideas all at once half the time. So
Same.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking of with the COVID-19 thing. So if you guys want to get like real tinfoil hat for a second, you remember when the COVID-19 stuff first started coming out, and there were like these papers saying that it looked like it was an engineered virus.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I haven't heard anything about that. I heard some people like debunking it, but like I just haven't looked into that enough because that was very provocative, especially when you start looking at who the lab that it supposedly was created at.
Yeah, Bill Gates's lab.
Bill Gates's lab, and Bill Gates is, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is very much like one of their obsessions is like population control and overpopulation. Which, let's be clear to all your listeners, the overpopulation thing is a myth. There is plenty of space on Earth and plenty of resources for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. Like if you really look at it, the only people ever yelling about overpopulation are the richest and most powerful people.
Yeah. It's because they exploit all of those things.
Exactly. So you should, definitely the overpopulation thing is nonsense. But people like Bill Gates are like obsessed with it. And have either of you watched the BBC series Utopia?
No.
Okay, so one of the sort of major plot, you should definitely, all of you go watch Utopia. It's only like 2 seasons. It unfortunately didn't really got kind of cut short, but it's an amazing show. But one of the major plot points is that the government, or this, not the government, but like this kind of shadowy organization is wanting to release this virus that will make most of the population on Earth like sterile. In this attempt to like curb like overpopulation, like this sort of Malthusian, crisis that in reality is not going to happen and is total myth anyway. But I look at the fact that he was one of the people who owned that lab. There were all these things that came out saying it looked like it was an engineered virus. And then it started in a place like China where maybe someone knew that it would be able to spread from there outward. And if I get super conspiratorial, I'm like, I wonder if we're in a situation like in that show where this was intentionally released into the wild because it's like a culling.
Yeah.
It's going to get rid of a lot of people. Not everybody, it's going to leave the healthy and the able-bodied, but it's going to sort of sweep the, sweep off a lot of stuff.
It's really weird to me that the people who are spreading this idea that it's not a big deal are the same people who are honestly the most susceptible to it. Like the elderly and like, whatever, Trump supporters.
Yeah.
That's
makes you wonder if that idea isn't being pushed to them.
Exactly.
Because someone wants to get rid of them.
Yeah. It's like they're, it's almost like you create one thing, so the reaction is actually what you're going for. It's the result.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me wonder too, like, one of the things that Republicans or, conservatives in this country have been obsessed with for a long time is like Social Security and the strain that the boomers are going to put on kind of the social systems and economy once they, are all elderly. And they're very close to that. Close. And so it just seems like a very convenient moment for this thing to suddenly appear, and it's like, I don't know, like it ultimately doesn't really matter because it's here and we just got to do what we can to try to manage it. But I know Matt Christman was talking on Chapo about how nobody knows how long this is going to last, like this quarantine kind of thing is going to last. But it honestly can't, like, there have been some estimates of like up to a year, but like there's no way that'll happen because the economy of the world would just collapse if it this went on for more than, I don't know, like 4 months or something. Yeah. So he was saying that he thinks kind of the idea is that eventually we're kind of going to be told, well, yeah, sorry, you need to get back to work. And if you get corona, I don't know, so sad.
Yeah.
Too bad, and it's super grim because, I've got, my parents, while not, extremely elderly, are elderly enough that this could be dangerous for them. My girlfriend, she still has her grandmother's still alive, and she's quite elderly. And I guess it makes me even angrier in a conspiratorial way to think that like this could be an engineered crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be. And I mean, and also then again, it could not be too. It's like if there's no way of proving it, that's their thing too.
Yeah, but I do think it's going to be exploited.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's already been exploited. I mean, look at the way they handled it.
Already starting to do it.
Like with all those CEOs dumping stock. I mean, you think they're not related?
I honestly see the way this is going to go down, and this is my super doomer view of this.
Yeah,
is that like you're seeing the whole thing with it's not really universal basic income, but the idea that everybody is going to get like a certain amount of money to help them get through this. And what's wild is that it was like supposed conservatives who were first promoting this idea. And of course, the Democrats who can't get their heads out of their asses, like Pelosi and Schumer, are like squabbling over means testing this like small amount of money that's being offered. So like, I think the idea is that it's like a cold, calculated thing by the GOP because they realize that come November, what are people going to remember?
Yeah,
they're going to remember that Donald Trump gave me the money I needed to pay rent and not be homeless, and all the Democrats wanted to do was take it away from me.
Yeah.
And I think that this is being co-opted, and maybe it was engineered, maybe it's not, but I believe it's being co-opted as a way to basically finally stick the knife in the Democratic Party. And that sucks, but honestly, I'm there for it too, because the Democrats are awful, but so are the conservatives, so are the Republicans.
Yeah,
I don't really have a side anymore. I'm just not on the side of either of them anymore.
Yeah, a popular thing is Bernie is the compromise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
People are sharpening their guillotine blades.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, is this going to be a situation sort of similar to what happened in Germany after the Treaty of Versailles? Is the idea that this group of like, and let's not be, too generous to them, that these people who are promoting these things from the GOP are vile human beings, but they're trying to kind of sweep in and provide this basic lifeline of things that we should have had for decades.
Yeah. It's like an abusive parent. It's like an abusive parent.
Yeah.
They give you things just so they can, whenever you complain about anything whatsoever that is legitimate concerns, they can say, well, look at all these things I did for you. You're a liar and you're ungrateful.
Yep.
And that's really what it comes from.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering when the other shoe is going to drop, because you're seeing like this sort of anti-Chinese sentiment, and I almost wonder if like that's going to be encouraged to the point where, because I mean, let's be frank, China is going to be the only world superpower within 10 years. The US is on a downtrend, and it has been for a while. China is going to be the new world power. And it almost makes me wonder if it isn't like a reaction to that by the elite of this country. Like sort of creating this racial animus towards the Chinese and towards, the state of China.
Yeah, like calling it the Chinese virus, even though you probably shouldn't.
Or the Wuhan virus, yeah.
Or
it's
the
ridiculous.
Kung flu or whatever, because like people are...
God, I haven't heard that one. That's awful.
Dude, Kung flu is terrible, and I saw it trending on like Twitter for one day, and I was like, I really hate America.
Yeah.
It was only on American Twitter that it was trending, nowhere else. And Trump's just constantly like he's making a very like purposeful push at calling it the Chinese virus, because it's like, and I explained to somebody the other day, I was like trying to argue with them, like they're like, well, it's not really racist. I'm like, well, inherently it might not be, but what it is doing is it's associating this virus with the Chinese, and that will also incite bigots and their racism.
It already has in a lot of places.
Yeah, and it's doing it, and it's calculated, and people don't understand that, and it's like that's why it shouldn't be said, because it's going to trigger that racism in a lot of people.
Well, what it's going to give is like a scapegoat to people. It's going to give them, they're going to think like, oh, the reason my life is bad is because of the Chinese. They're not going to think, oh, the reason my life is bad is because we live in a country that has not provided any of the basic services that we pay taxes for. and is ruled by a class of people who speculate and gamble with their money, and who have created a society that, like, in which the margins are so thin that even the smallest disruption for like a month completely tanks the economy and collapses it because of rampant speculation. It's like they're not actually going to look at the real cause of like why everything is falling apart.
Yeah.
They're just going to look at the Chinese and say, "Oh no, it's their fault.
And-
They're the reason."
And really, it's the Waltons' fault. You know, these people who own like Walmart, who rely on welfare to take care of their employees while their shareholders and stockholders are literally raking in all of this money, and the family themselves are just like amassing this giant dragon horde that honestly belongs to their employees. Like that money, like any money that the employees need to get to supplement their income needs to come from the company itself. Like I don't understand why the government doesn't step in and say you need to pay your people more.
Yeah. Because I mean, a pretty easy explanation is the government doesn't care.
No, it's government welfare.
In reality,
It's corporate welfare. It's like using the actual people to prop up these corporations.
Well, I think the thing that this is showing too is that there is no lack of funds, right? Like people, you know, like both Democrats and Republicans like to complain about the budget and then about the deficit and all this kind of stuff. But you saw how fake that was when, like, after the stock market took a huge downturn, you know, the Fed just like created what $1.2 trillion out of thin air to try to prop it up for 15 minutes. And it's like, oh, actually money's not real. Like they can pay for whatever they want. They just don't want to.
I read an article. I don't know if it's been fact checked or not because I didn't do it, but I saw an article that said that the Fed's going to start to pump in $1 trillion per day into the stock market. Do you know how much money that is per person in this country? Like that's almost a spit on the neck. It's like, really, you're going to give like literally thousands of dollars per person in this country. They're just giving it to these corporations to keep the stock market going.
Yep. It's wild. It's really wild. And you know, in a just society, we would, you know, I guess bail out airlines and these other companies that are failing because they've been doing stock buybacks instead of, you know, saving their money, and nationalize them, you know, take control of them. But that's not going to happen.
A friend of mine just posted a video, Bill Duvendak, and he lives in Poland now. And he's an astrologer, and he just got back from the Left Hand Path Consortium. But he was telling the story about how he was kind of racing the shutdown of Poland from the UK. He was in the UK at the event, and he had to basically like find a way into Poland before they closed the border. And so he had this whole team of people trying to get him back into Poland. And whenever he actually got to Poland, like he said that their airline system was so much more efficient just because like there's only one airline because they've already done what you were describing in Poland.
Yeah, just nationalized it. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of industries in this country that should be. I mean, honestly, like I think Amazon should be nationalized. It's kind of a hot take, but
it's a utility. I mean, it works better than the Postal Service does.
Yeah.
It should be. I don't know if it will ever be, but it definitely should be.
Yeah.
I think that once a company gets to monopoly status and they've lobbied enough for them to be able to like skirt all of these monopoly laws and antitrust laws, you know, if you get up to a certain point where you can have a Jeff Bezos, then maybe you should nationalize that and get that back into the people's hands. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, I don't know. We talked about a lot tonight, guys.
Didn't really stick to just Thelema. We kind of went into geopolitics and everything.
That's fine because I mean, like last episode, we talked about like the Hellfire Club. We talked about like I don't know. We talked about so much, and we always end up like we'll start being spooky and occult at the beginning of it, and then it just evolves into us like ranting about left-hand ideologies and stuff. So. It's the way it always is, pretty much, isn't it, Donnie?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's really our way of easing. Like it's where we use like the occult is like sheep's wool, and then we're the wolves of the left underneath it.
Well, think
So, like,
I think they kind of go hand in hand. It's a completely like inclusive, yet liberating sort of ideology. Compassion
Mm-hmm.
to your fellow person, and
Mm-hmm.
also self freedom preservation. I think
yeah.
there's a lot of empathy in there.
Yeah, I think people if you're curious about Thelema and you are more down with sort of my more left take on it, there's a really good site that I'm not associated with, but I think what they talk about is really cool. They kind of sync up with me on a lot of these ideas, and it's called Thelemic Union, or thelemicunion.com. I think you have a Twitter account as well, but they run a great blog where they just talk about Thelemic philosophy, but they have sort of the same perspective that I have on it. And so if you want to kind of explore that would be my number one recommendation for people to go read some of the articles that person posts.
Yeah, that sounds great. And like if you know, uh I mean, I recommend everybody that's listening, every one of our members, to kind of look at it, because I've been interested in it a while.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since I read the Book of the Law, and to be honest, I didn't I didn't really understand a lot of it, but it's because I've only read it like once. But ever
Yeah.
since then, I've been really interested in learning more about Thelema. So
I think the thing about the Book of the Law, it's hard to make sense of it if you have never encountered Thelema before.
yeah,
Um, I can't speak to the quality of all local OTO bodies. There are quite a few in the U.S. So if you're curious in what it's about, maybe look up and see if you got a local OTO body, and maybe once if things are ever back to normal in the sense that you can like go out in public, maybe go to a Gnostic Mass, which is the sort of it's the OTO sort of religious performance of like this sort of mass type thing that Crowley wrote. And usually whenever I'm traveling and I go to a new city I haven't been to before, I'll look up and see if there's a local OTO body. If there is, I'll go to their mass. I really enjoy the mass. I think it's like a beautiful ceremony. It's really cool to take part in if you've never seen it performed before. Um, but yeah, like maybe go check that out, or like I said, read some articles on the Link Union and see if like this kind of thing jives with you. Because one of the one of the big things in leftist thought, right, is examining like material reality. Examining the material relationships between like capital and labor. Um, Being able to like think about like class from a purely material standpoint. But the thing it lacks is like a spiritual outlook, and I think human beings are naturally like, spiritual people. We all have some. Even if you say that you're an atheist, you still have some yearning for like more than just the material world, even if
right,
you won't admit it to yourself. And I think what Thelema offers is a spiritual philosophy for like leftists. And maybe that's just me putting my own leftist thoughts onto this thing and then, making it my own thing. I don't know. But that's the way I see it. And I think that if you are a leftist, but you feel like you're lacking some sort of a spiritual framework to better understand like your soul and the world from that aspect, maybe look into Thelema. I know there's also like a strong Catholic left, and if that's your thing, like cool. But I'm just I've never been able to get down with Catholicism myself, so
yeah, yeah. I don't want to go down that path, but
like
yeah,
I love cathedrals. Whenever I've traveled in Europe, one of my favorite things to do is go to cathedrals. I use Catholic holy water that I get from the local cathedral here, but I've never had any desire to convert to
yeah.
Catholicism. So
It's cool imagery, but it's just it's also it's I mean it's stolen from a lot of other stuff, but
yeah,
that's something that we'll probably go into eventually at some point on this podcast too, is because
yeah,
I want to go into a pretty broad spectrum of a lot of things. So,
cool.
but well, Donnie, do you have anything else, man?
I mean, I've got we touched on so many things today. I wanted to go over Alan Greenfield. We kind of touched on him a little bit. I just wanted to
Yeah.
talk about the the secret cipher embedded into the Book of the Law.
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that now, or you could come back sometime maybe, and we could talk about it then. We've been going for about an hour and a half so far,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't
I
know.
mean, I'm fine with doing a few more minutes if you
Okay,
guys are
fine.
cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm definitely down. So yeah, sure.
Okay. So for people who aren't aware, if you read through the Book of the Law, it becomes very obvious that there is a cipher built into it. In specific, there is this like long string of numbers and letters, and it has like a passage after it that says, what meanest this, O prophet? Thou shalt never know. One will come after you who will expound upon it. And the idea is that it's some sort of proof, but you've got to be able to decipher it. And later on in the Book of the Law, there's this page that is because Crowley was very specific when he said that if the Book of the Law was published, it had to also include the scans of the original documents or photos of the original documents. So every copy of the Book of the Law that you get that's legitimate should also have at the end of it like photocopies of all the pages. There's one particular page that has like a grid on it that he drew with like letters and numbers on it and stuff, and you can kind of tell that it means something. And a lot of people had kind of considered the idea that the Book of the Law had a cipher or that it could be analyzed on a sort of gematria type basis. But the problem is you can't really use Greek gematria or Jewish gematria on English language, right? There needed to be an English gematria. There needed to be an English Kabbalah. So, like Crowley's successor, his magical child, Frater Akkad, um, he kind of figured out the first three letters of the cipher for ALW, but he never really got beyond that. And it wasn't until kind of the 1970s that like some researchers, including Jake Stratton Kent, were able to figure out the actual contents of the cipher. And it turns out that it's an 11. It's like a cipher based on the number 11, which is a number with like occult significance. The number of letters, and abrahadabra is 11. And like, imagine you start at A, right? You count 11 letters, you get to L. You count 11 letters, you get to W. You count 11 letters, and you just keep going that like 11 letters down until you have gotten all the letters of the alphabet, and you also have then a number that's associated with each letter. And what's interesting is that there's all these correspondences within the Book of the Law itself to this, ALW 11 cipher. In particular, that random string of numbers and letters I talked about before. If you apply it to that, I believe you get. There's two ways you can apply it to it. The first way is if you take all the letters of the, if I remember this correctly, I think you take all the letters of the alphabet and you add up all their values. It like equals a certain number, and that value also equals the phrase English alphabet. And
Weird.
like there's like a couple other things, but it's basically like, I'm just trying to say it off the top of my head, but it's like proof that the cipher works. Okay, but what does this mean? Like, why is it important that there's a cipher? What Alan Greenfield, he's an occultist, a thelemite as well. I guess he says he's like a former thelemite. He's a former member of the OTO. I still think he's a thelemite. But Greenfield had this idea that, how should I say this? I guess he was looking at, Greenfield's a big like old school UFO researcher. He was one of the like sort of original crew of like UFO researchers. Like he was friends with Gray Bar. He was friends with John Giel and what was his name? Can't remember at the top of my head. But anyways, Greenfield was like friends with all these guys. Like he knew Al Bender, for example. And he was looking at all these like weird names that would pop up in UFO cases. Like Furcon or Ashtar or Indrid Cold. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that it almost seemed like those names maybe had some double meanings to them. And then he started taking the ALW cipher law and applying it to these names and seeing what kind of values he could get. And then he started realizing that there were like connections between different names and words that were being told people by these, UFO entities. And his theory is that kind of in every generation, or in every, let's say, aeon, there's like a channeled text. And this channeled text contains a cipher that is used to communicate with the Illuminati, let's say, in the very most basic sense of the word, like the illuminated, people who are in the know, occultists, members of secret societies, things like that. The idea is that these entities could, say some kind of weird name or phrase to some random out in the middle of nowhere who would have no idea what he's talking about. But then someone who was in the know, someone who could then look at that, someone who knew the cipher could look at that name and say, oh, this is what they're really saying. It's really like an encoded message. And this plays very heavily in like the Hellier narrative. Like, for example, I've talked about how anyone who's grown up in Appalachia knows that every little town in Appalachia is weird. Okay. Like the town I grew up in, Coldwater, Alabama. It had stories of monsters in the woods and underground caves and all this kind of stuff. Every place has stuff like that. It's just part of America, right? But not every town equals the number 93.
Yeah.
But Hellier equals 93.
Wow.
Okay. And I think my friend Kelsey also was able to find interesting stuff about like the town name Hellier also has some relation to like Pan through an English poetry thing. Like there's all these like things that tie in to like the name Hellier that make it more significant, right? I don't think there's even anything particularly strange going on in Hellier, but I think it's just it's almost like a proof that something is trying to communicate.
Yeah. And like reaching out to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Greenfield's whole like thesis is that you can use the cipher to basically get more information about, like, let's say UFO cases, paranormal stuff that you're investigating, like on a practical basis for that. To like give you a quick example of this, right before season 1 of Hellier came out, I was getting these weird emails from this guy in Minnesota, in Stillwater, Minnesota, who was telling me about like seeing black triangle UFOs over Stillwater. And I didn't even think about it until I started watching season 2 flashback. And I was like, oh, Stillwater. That's the same place where the guy was like telling me about UFOs like last year.
Wow.
And so I, looked at the name Stillwater cipher. And if anybody wants to play around the cipher real quick, they show it being used in Hellier season 2. But myself and my friend Alan wrote like an online kind of tool to utilize the cipher. And it's at naeq.io. So it's like NAEQ, like New Aeon English Kabbalah.io. So I put the name Stillwater into this, got a value back. And I saw that value also equals like the phrases lust and power. And then I looked at a map of Stillwater and I was like, oh, there's a big power plant in Stillwater. And it's right in like across the river from the strip club.
Wow. Wow.
That's awesome.
There's like another, it also equals the palace, and Stillwater is known for this place called the Alhambra Palace, which is like this really famous, like crazy mansion that was built by some tycoon in the 1800s. And it's like what Greenfield would say is that these synchronicities, like these connections between the name and the values, are kind of like letting you know that you're on the right path. And Greenfield claims that if you're good enough at the using the cipher, like you can literally just like find out injured Colt's dress. You know,
Mhm.
you can walk right up to his house, which is what this Terry Wrist character claimed to have done. But you know, like the cipher itself. Here's the other thing that some people will bring up. They'll mention that like there's also something like there's over like 2,000 different ciphers that work within the Book of the Law. And when I talked to Greenfield over Christmas, I brought this up to him, and he said that that while that's true, it's better to just focus on a cipher like one of them, and focus on the cipher that's most being used. So I like a lot of people told me, oh, there's other ciphers, and oh, they also give interesting values, but I'm like, I kind of just stick to the ALW cipher.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, because that's too much. I can't cross check 2,000 other ciphers for values. You know, it's hard enough to do it with one.
It also seems like it's a little bit more cohesive. Like
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's like it's a lot easier to follow because like whenever I first watched Hellier, I was like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like I don't even understand this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a pretty basic understanding, but like to me, whenever I watched Hellier, it like sparked a fire inside of me. Like
Mm-hmm.
it awoken my wanting to learn more and gain more knowledge, and I did. I went out and I bought all these books. I've been actively trying to research some of this stuff myself, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it set me down a path as well. And then I started looking at the cipher, and I finally realized how it worked, and I was like, okay, well, that's a lot more simple now that I think about it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible the stuff that you can get out of it. And I've gone to your website. I actually went to your that website before I even knew who you were,
That's awesome.
and then I realized that that you had made it, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, that's a weird thing that happened. And then like that was like whenever I was listening to like Where'd the Road Go, I
Mm-hmm.
started listening to it, and then I heard Soraya say your name, and I was like, oh, weird. Okay, well that's another weird thing. I didn't know that you were on that either. So it's just kind of funny how that all kind of connected too. So
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point of the Hillier thing, right? I've said it before, I think on Soraya's show, that I think it's a recruiting effort. Because
yeah,
I think that the secret chiefs, or whatever you want to call them, I think that they realize that the older secret societies like Freemasonry or even the current OTO have not adequately created a new generation of people to kind of fight the good fight, right? Because
Mhm.
while I do think that there are sinister human forces on this planet that are trying to dominate and control people, I also think that there are also spiritual forces that are doing the same thing. You know, you can
yeah,
call them the archons, you can call them the Black Lodge, like, and maybe they influence the people. You know, I don't think that necessarily like the elites are, you know, reporting directly up to Moloch or anything, but
yeah,
I just think that as above, so below. You know, like there are spirits who have our best interest in mind, and there are spirits who don't.
yeah,
And I think that Hellier is a recruiting effort to recruit people for Third Order, the White Lodge. Like, I hate the terms White and Black Lodge. It's just, I don't know.
it's a
It's
little.
got this weird racist kind of thing going on with
It's
it.
weird, like because the White Lodge is, oh, it's the good one, and like
Yeah.
the Black Lodge is like the bad one. It's like
Mhm.
just call them like I don't know, like I don't even know what you could call them, but yeah, I see where you're going with that
Yeah,
too.
it can be a little dicey trying to use those terms, but I think people will know that I'm coming in with, you know, the best intentions.
Yeah,
But I think it's a recruiting effort for basically the forces of like good and freedom, you know, like, and I think that certain people, when they watch Hellier, it will trigger something in their mind. Well, they'll start looking more into this because of the last, you know, I don't know what, like 200-300 years of scientific materialism. We've completely lost, at least in the West, a whole subclass of people who are trained in dealing with the spirit world.
Mhm.
And just because we've been scientific materialists for the past couple 100 years in the West doesn't mean that the spirit world just went away. It's still there and still has influence in the world. And now you have a whole generation of people who have no way to understand or deal with it. And like that's why I try to get people doing magic. That's why I try to interest people in it and try to support them, you know, from making tools for them to providing any knowledge that I might have. because I think that's going to become like increasingly needed in the years to come. You know, like we're going to need people who know how to deal with, you know, both the spiritual world and the material.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a dire lack of that right now, and that's what that's what kind of what I see. My interpretation of like the whole Hellier narrative is basically like recruiting people for that effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Hellier they called it an initiation ritual, and it was like, but who's it an initiation ritual for? And it's like, well, I mean, maybe the people watching the show.
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing that. Okay, so a lot of people like to look at Hellier and claim that it's like made up, or you know, and sure, things are edited, right? Like you can tell by the timestamps in certain places that things are edited because it's a television show and they're trying to make it exciting and interesting. But I've never really considered it to be any hoaxing, because I look at all of the stuff that makes sense to me and obviously doesn't make sense to the Newkirks or anybody else involved. Mm-hmm. You know, like especially the stuff at the end of season 2 with the Star Sapphire and everything. Like they don't, like it's obvious by the way they talk about it that they don't know anything about this stuff. So how could they have possibly faked? The possibility is there that somebody could be leading them on. You know, I was pretty vocal months ago about how I thought Greenfield was kind of the one pulling the strings. After I kind of like met him and talked to him, I don't really necessarily think that anymore.
Yeah.
But I do feel like they're being led by something, maybe human, maybe not. And, you know, like the initiation, it's the thing that they never really say in the show. And that this is what I believe. So everybody else make up their own mind about this. But again, I think it's the 93 current. I think it's encouraging people to become Thelemites. But that's just my opinion, and people can approach that however they want. And again, Thelema isn't the OTO. So I'm not saying, hey, go join the OTO.
Yeah.
I'm just saying maybe you should, if you were really touched by what was going on in Hellier, it really like sparked an interest in you, maybe you should look a little more at Thelema, because the Thelemic current that is running through that show is like so strong, even if the Newkirks don't even realize it.
Yeah, and like they've gotten a following too. Like I'm part of like they're like the paranormal, like the museum and everything, and the groups and stuff that they have. And I see like there's just they have like, such a big following. And I mean it's also because they're good people too. Like they're not like they're very genuine people. And I'm glad that like to see that, because like one of the things that kept me out of the world of like the paranormal and the occult was just like the accessibility of it. I ran into a bunch of people that were really toxic, like earlier on in like whenever I first wanted to get into it, when I was like probably in my late teens, early 20s, when I was like was really interested in it, and like I just got put off by it. But then I saw Hellier, and it made me make this group for all these other people that are like minded and into like the paranormal. And it now has got me on this path where we're talking to you. So
that brings up a good point. A lot of people have bad experiences, especially within the neo-pagan community. I know people like Sarah and Lawless have talked a lot about this, about the rampant like abuse and manipulation that goes on within neo-pagan communities. And you know, that is off a lot of people, and like rightfully so, I think. And it sucks because there are some people involved in these things that are genuine, like kind, caring people. It's really unfortunate that a lot of people have those bad experiences first, and it turns them off from forever. But you know, I would just say to people, like, keep an open mind, and also like stay frosty with other people, especially getting involved with the neo-pagan community. There are a lot of bad actors out there, and it can be tough. You know, I don't know, like beware of gurus. You know?
Yeah.
Like if somebody tries to tell you, like, you know, my way is the only way to think, and this is the only way, like, you know that's a bad scene. Like, one of the reasons I kept going to the ritual night at the OTO Lodge up here was because my teacher there and now mentor Scott, from the very beginning was like, this is how I see things, but I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter if you see them differently from how I see them. I don't care. Like, share your results. Like, do it your way and let me know how it works. You know, he's like, obviously, I think my way is the best way, and I think it gets the best results. But like, I'm not in charge of it. Like, use your own head. And that was very like endearing to me, because I was like, you do run into a lot of people who kind of claim to be the only way.
Yeah.
Even with like Wicca, I mean, Gerald Gardner started the whole, this comes from a long line of thousands of year old witches and just all that crap that people are just spewing these days. And it's like, come on, man. Everyone who knows what's up knows that that's not real.
We're the daughters of the ones you couldn't burn or something like that.
Yeah. The whole idea that it is a tradition is nonsense. I mean, and this is not to like talk bad about Wiccans, whatever. Like, if you get something out of Wicca, like, awesome, keep doing it. Like, there's no reason. It's magic like everything else. But I guess don't fool yourself. Like, accept like the origins of your philosophy or your system. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't know. It just don't claim that you're the continuation of some ancient lineage. Like, a lot of people worry about like appropriation and magic. Like, oh, I can't do a voodoo spell because I'm being appropriated.
We've talked about it in here a little bit, but I'm 50-50 on it. It's like, I understand why people want to be like conscious of it, but it's really hard.
Well, be conscious of it. Just don't let it limit you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have anything. I don't see anything wrong with me using like a voodoo spell or something. Like, if I want to make some hot foot because I need to get rid of somebody, like, that's fine. But I also don't claim that I'm a voodoo priest.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, there's like certain lines there, and magic itself is appropriative, right? Like, you look at the Greek magical papyri, it is a collection of Jewish, Greek, and Egyptian spells. Like, the magician whose notebook that was, like, didn't care where it came from. All he cared about was the tech. Did it work?
Yeah.
Because ultimately people I think it comes from like people viewing magic as like religion or spirituality, when in reality it's like, it's a technology.
Yeah, it's tools you use to hack your own mind and your reality around you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, use what works. I've got this almost kind of like Bruce Lee, like Jeet Kune Do view of magic. I'm like, if it works, I'll use it. I don't care where it's from. Like, that doesn't matter to me. All that matters to me is the results.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the heart of magic.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, magic is or should be a practical thing. And yeah, it's like fun and can be a spiritual thing as well. But first and foremost, like, magic is a practical thing. You use it to affect change or to communicate with spirits or like to do any number of things. But if you are doing something and you're not getting results from it, like, you need to mix things up. You need to try something else, because, it's not just for fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get lost in the aesthetics of it, and then they totally miss the technology.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Seth. You too.
Yeah. No, and do you have anything that you're working on that you want to plug, Wren, or anything? Like, anything you want people to check out?
I mean, if you want to check out my blog, that's at liminalroom.com, or you can check out the new Aeon English Kabbalah calculator at naeq.io. I'm also on Twitter at liminalbird if you want to follow me there. I've got a couple little things going, but like, I'm writing an essay for a collection about fairy lore that is going to be coming out hopefully later this year, and I'll let people know, when that's coming out. And I'm also working on a chat book for the tables of practice that I've been sending people. So it's kind of like covering the trithemian drawing spirits into crystals method, but like the sort of practical adaptation of those methods that we've been using for the last couple of years at Leaping Laughter. But yeah, so if people want to follow me on Twitter, that's probably the best place to keep track of like my projects and like when stuff's coming out. But yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on and talking to us, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. It was a whole lot of fun, guys.
Glad
you invited me on.
If you ever want to come on again, we'd be glad to have you. So
awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much. And just one thing for the listeners, if you're listening to the program pre-recorded from SoundCloud and you'd like to join us live and unedited, we record each Saturday night around 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. Central Time in the OPCO Discord server. You can listen live and interact with the host throughout the comments section, and your comments could be discussed on the show. That's the OPCO Discord server. You can find the link in the comments section, and we hope to see you there.
All right. Well, take care, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe.
Yeah, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay frosty, and I will talk to y'all later.
All right. See ya.
Bye. See you, everyone.